The guy that Spike's referring to is a wanted guy. Goes by the name of Cedric Stevenson. 5 days ago, while being transported through Sea-Tac, he escaped. There's video. You can watch him do it. They're standing at a ticketing agent. It appears as though he is being transported by a bounty hunter who's now bringing him back to Kentucky, where he's wanted on several warrants. Somebody turns his back, and the guy just takes off. And he runs, and he jumps onto a light rail train, and he makes his escape. We haven't seen him in almost a week now. And the audience knows this. Spike and I solve crimes. We solved the case of the two missing mini donkeys pretty quick.
Missing Liberty Bell,
which we found lickety-split. Yep. And now, no pun intended, and now we are very fortunate because we have Chuck Jordan, who is the president of the National Association of Fugitive Recovery Agents, joining us now. Chuck Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Chuck, tell me a little bit about your business, and then we can ask you some questions about how you would go about searching for a wanted fugitive in our area.
Absolutely. Well, before I begin with that, I just wanted to clarify that Mr. Stevenson did not escape from bounty hunters. He escaped from a private prisoner transport company.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that's my mistake.
Is the prisoner transport company the ones that located him in Seattle?
No. It's my understanding that he was wanted out of Kentucky on a warrant, and he was picked up in Seattle there on that warrant and extradited. Went through extradition proceedings, and Kentucky had contracted with the prisoner transport service to go and pick him up and bring him back to Kentucky.
Okay.
So, Mr. Jordan, how did you get into the business of
fugitive recovery?
Okay, so do we refer to you as a fugitive recovery expert or as a bounty hunter? Like, how does that work?
These days it's pretty much interchangeable. And technically speaking, we're bail bond fugitive recovery agents that we work as part of the commercial bail industry. And a bounty hunter, we also have an organization for that as well. And that's something that has nothing to do with the bail bond industry. It has more to do with, rewards for justice program and different things that aren't related to the commercial bail bond industry.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, how did you get into the business, and then we can take it from there?
Yeah, I initially started out doing process serving. I had taken an interest in skip tracing, and I was looking for a way into the business. And I started off initially serving court papers and doing work for attorneys, locating people that needed to be served. And I would also do filings down at the courthouse, at the court clerk's office. And down there, you'll also meet quite a few bail bondsmen because they're down there posting bail bonds. So, I had met some bondsmen, and one in particular had asked me if I had had any skip tracing experience, and I told him that I did. And he asked me if I'd be interested in working some bail bond cases for him. And that was, in the neighborhood of 25 years ago. It was a little bit less regulated back then. I didn't really have to do much other than he handed me the paperwork and I got to work on it.
What was what's the learning curve? Was you ever find yourself in some tricky situations locating people, or they're generally, they don't want to be located? So how does that work?
Exactly. I went and took some training. Back then, it was the National Association of Bail Enforcement Agents, which is now the National Association of Fugitive Recovery Agents, has merged. But back then, it was them. And I went and did some training to learn a little bit about defensive tactics, mechanics of arrest, obviously fugitive investigations, and learning from some people that had already been in the business for quite some time. And, it's the big part of it is humans are social creatures. So it's more along the lines of finding that Judas, somebody with the information that has an incentive, to give you that information in order to find somebody. When
you say incentive, what do you mean? Are you kind of walking around with cash, or how does that work?
Yeah, sometimes we hand out rewards. I mean, we work on a percentage of the bond. So depending on how big the bond is, depends on how much money we can actually pay our informants. And also we usually don't get paid anything until we make the apprehension. So we don't have a lot of upfront money to work with most of the time. So we do hand out a little bit of reward money or incentives that way. But most of the incentives that I'm talking about are people that just don't like that person.
Ex-girlfriends, ex-wives, ex-husbands.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. I've only had I've never had anybody escape from my custody, but I have had a couple of people that I was out to arrest that outran me initially. And one in particular case like that, the guy outran me, and I had already interviewed his girlfriend and given her my business card, and the landlord who lived in the same building gave her my card as well. So anyhow, this guy, I was doing surveillance, and he pulled up, got off of a bus, and I wasn't sure if it was him at first, and he made me before I made him, and he took off running. And he was like Mr. Stevenson. He was fast.
Wow.
So he outran me. And he would call and antagonize me because he got my phone number from his girlfriend. He would call and antagonize me about it. Which, you got to have a thick skin to be in this line of work. I don't take it personal. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have had the job to make money. But I told him, I said, the last time he had called me, I said, I only have to be lucky once. You have to be lucky every day. And he actually agreed with me on that. And as luck would have it, I found him the next day because apparently the girlfriend stiffed the landlord on the rent. And she called me up and snitched this guy out. So there was the incentive. If she didn't like the guy, he didn't like the girlfriend because they got stiffed on the rent. So her revenge was she called me and told me where to find this guy.
That's wild that he would antagonize you by calling you. It feels like obviously like quite a risky. Just like, did you ever see the movie Catch Me If You Can? Where DiCaprio's characters
I did, yeah,
calling Tom Hanks. Did that like surprise you when you saw that in the movie? You're like, wow, I've experienced this. I've lived through this.
Yeah. I mean, it's happened a handful of times. It's not really a common thing, but you do get some characters out there that you're dealing with.
I almost could have gone down the road to being. You may not know this, Mike,
but I do. You were working for the private detective, right?
When I was. Because I think one of the things that works out is like if you look like an everyman, like Dog the Bounty Hunter is probably the most famous bounty hunter that people can think of outside of maybe like Boba Fett, but he's fictional. But you want to kind of blend in. Dog the Bounty Hunter doesn't blend in. He's not trying to blend in. But I was hired when I was 18 years old, by a private eye who used to pay me money. Is our guest still on, Laura? Oh, yeah. There he is. Who used to pay me money to follow people around. And that was my way into that industry, was like he would give me a location. I would go to that location and I would just like take pictures of these people on their outings because they were doing whatever he was being hired to follow them for. I don't know. I wasn't privy to that information. But I don't imagine that's kind of a little bit like bounty hunting, just like a very low level.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to blend into whatever environment you're going to be in. And sometimes you have to get creative. There's sometimes there's certain areas or neighborhoods where I would stick out like a sore thumb and people would immediately think, oh, that's a cop or something. But there's ways around that. There's times I would wear like a utility worker's vest and a helmet. I'd have a clipboard with a little letterhead that says utility maintenance company. And if anybody would come up and ask me, I'd be hanging around a telephone pole near the fugitive's last known residence.
Wow.
I'm doing a structural integrity check on this telephone pole. They're going to have to take it down. To come down. And I'd just be out there, and I'll tell you, with the vest on and the helmet and the clipboard, I just blended in like you wouldn't believe. There was one time we were doing that, and we caught the guy. There was a few of us. We had a team out there that were all dressed the same, like utility workers. And we finally
one was dressed as a cop, one is an Indian. I'm just kidding.
And as we grabbed this guy and cuffed him, and he was fighting us a little bit. We had him on the ground, cuffed him, and tossed him in the vehicle. And as we're driving down the road, all these neighbors that had been talking to us, thinking we're utility workers, are looking at us in shock. So I yelled out the window. I said, "You see what happens when you don't pay your light bill?"
We're talking to Chuck Jordan. He's the president of the National Association of Fugitive Recovery Agents. Chuck, I notice, I'm no detective, but I notice you're standing, it looks like in the feed we're looking at, you're standing in front of a safe. It's probably a gun safe.
Correct.
I was going to ask, I'm good at this. You're probably licensed to carry a firearm. Is it often come into play in your line of work? Is it dangerous? Obviously, it's a dangerous job.
Absolutely. I know, like, some of the people that are on the TV shows and things like that. I know, like Dog the Bounty Hunter, he carries pepper spray or whatever. Which I don't know. I think the gun culture is much different in Hawaii, where he was operating out of. I think that it's very difficult for people to get permits to carry, and there's not as much. I'm sure there's guns there, but not nearly as much as there are in other places. But for the most part, your fugitive recovery agent, bounty hunter, whatever term you prefer to use, is going to be armed because of the element of people that we deal with. And that's not to say that we're going to use it to affect the apprehension. That's our life insurance. We want to go home at the end of the day after we're working a case. That's to protect us. That's not to go out and do anybody harm. That's for our own self-defense.
Sure, that makes sense. All right, so have you read anything on the case that we're dealing with here right now in Seattle? Have you looked into this case of Mr. Stevenson escaping?
I did. I saw the video. I read a little news report about it.
How would you go about hunting this guy down if you were here in Seattle?
Well, the first thing I would do is I'd be looking for jail records to see, was anybody coming to visit him? Who was he contacting on the telephone, to find out, who his circle is, who he's in contact with. Because when you're a fugitive, especially when you run away from the airport still handcuffed, you need help. So yeah. He needs help in order to stay free, in order to evade capture. So I'd be looking for the people that he would reach out to for help, and that's where I would start. Excuse me. Obviously we're doing kind of a thing where we just check in on it every day because we're on day 5 now. And anytime I see anything on TV, it's always like, oh, the first 48 or whatever the number is. You got to get somebody, because otherwise they're in the wind and they're gone. How much harder does it get to find someone than when they've been gone for 5 days like this? Yeah, it does get exponentially more difficult. I mean, obviously, when he was in handcuffs, running around wherever he was near the airport, it would have been a little bit easier to have located him, being in that situation. But once he was able to get somewhere and get some help and get the cuffs off and maybe change clothes, it does become more difficult. But time is still on our side because, like I said, people are social creatures. They're going to reach out to people that they know. They're going to return to old habits eventually, old places eventually, and eventually someone is going to give them up. There's always going to be that person out there that, whether it be a financial incentive or some sort of vendetta, they're going to give them up.
Do you think that he's getting help from somebody just based on the fact that he's been able to elude detectives and everybody?
Yeah, I absolutely do think he's getting help from someone because I don't think he got those handcuffs off on his own. He needed some help with that. He needed some tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think he probably would have changed his what's going through his mind right now? I mean, you have to get into a mind of these people when you're hunting them down. Like, what is he doing right now?
You do. I mean, he's running on adrenaline. I mean, obviously, when he escaped, I mean, it's you can never underestimate people's desire to be free. It's like the most valuable thing you have is your freedom. So, the guy's been running on adrenaline from the moment he made the decision to go for it. So, and he's still running on adrenaline to some extent, and he's in survival mode right now. So I imagine he's keeping his head down. He's found someone that's willing to shelter him, and he's trying to keep a low profile for the time being.
Fascinating. You think that's more likely than him fleeing the area? Is just to lay low and let the smoke let it die down?
Well, that's all circumstantial. It depends on who he has helping him and
right.
what their resources are. If that resource is available to him for him to get out of the area and go somewhere else, I'm sure that's what he's done.
Yeah, if his friend has a private jet.
Or a car. I mean,
or
take me to Idaho. Take me to Montana.
Yeah, you get on a boat, you're in Canada in 20 minutes here. Yeah. All right. Well, that is Chuck Jordan, president of the National Association of Fugitive Recovery Agents. We really appreciate your insight and making the time.